opportunity to also be viewing, as first we look at another example, another demonstration of what body prayer and faith means.
Come, Holy Spirit, come move among us. 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 Oh, peace deep and divine, enter this heart of mine. Oh, peace sweet and sublime, enter this heart of mine. Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Oh, peace deep and divine, enter this heart of mine. Oh, peace sweet and sublime, enter this heart of mine. Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Oh, peace deep and divine, enter this heart of mine. Oh, peace sweet and sublime, enter this heart of mine. Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Oh, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Now joining us to explain what body prayer is and the role that it may play in our spiritual life, we're privileged to have two persons who have had a special experience and training in this regard. First is Sarah Bentley, an ordained minister. She's also a counselor at the New Life Institute, a United Methodist Counseling Service Center here in Austin. Sarah has spent some 15 years working with liturgical movement and body prayer. Also joining us today is Reverend Terry Dowdy, who is a pastor at St. Luke United Methodist Church. Terry also participated in the body prayer demonstrations that we videotaped at First United Methodist Church. And he's very active in creation spirituality, conducting workshops, teaching body prayer to those who want to learn this ancient art of talking with God. And we're pleased to have you folks here to talk to us today.
Thank you.
I'd like to have you, Sarah, as one who's been related to liturgical dance for some time, give us a little bit of a sense of what your experience has been and where body prayer has come from in the past.
Well, most people think that body prayer is something new, and they see it now in either in liturgical dance or simple prayer like you saw, and they think, well, this must have come from someplace other than their own religious traditions. But in fact, if we read carefully in the Bible about worship, particularly in the Psalms and the Old Testament, you'll see that early Hebrew worship, as well as then Christian worship, was very embodied, we might say. There was a lot of gesture. There are a lot of directions to pray with your arms lifted. There's a lot of processional movement. In the earliest Christian liturgies, we know that they never sat, something which would be a different form of prayer for some of our churches today. And there was standing and walking in the synagogues as people prayed, and people even took forms with their body to express certain experiences or desired experiences, including the position of the cross, which would be taken standing and with your arms extended at a wide angle for hours at a time.
And I recently came across something that indicated that the word for chorus means to be in a circle, stanza means to stand, that there are directions even in our hymnals that suggest an earlier experience with dance.
Right. The earliest expression of dance in the Christian community would have been ring dances, which were done in liturgical settings, often in secret. Later they were done to express theologically communion based on an ancient hymn that supposedly Jesus participated in, kind of like a caller in a square dance, and he stood in the middle and called to the people on the perimeter. And they took this form to express communion, and as well as the dance of the angels around God's throne, and they would dance it for centuries, including dancing it at grave sites to assist the spirit of the person into the resurrected state.
Okay, well, I think that in this season it's well to know that the word carol also means dance, and that body prayer, Terry, as a form of liturgical movement, there's a broader context in which we're thinking about this today, and I know that your emphasis has been on creation spirituality. Tell us a little bit about, for instance, the workshops that you do on this.
The workshops that I do on creation-centered spirituality, which comes out of, you'll recognize Matthew Fox, comes out of his work in a sense, resurrecting some forms of worship and spiritual understanding that come from medieval mysticism, Meister Eckhart, Hildegard, some others, that goes back to Jesus, to the author of the Gospel of John, all the way back to some of the earliest storytellers in the Old Testament. It's an understanding, well, it's not an understanding, it's a way of living, a way of behaving that is worship. It's not, the workshops that I do are not so head-oriented. They are primarily experiential.
Okay, so the movement has a way of getting people into their feelings, into the wholeness of themselves in a way that just sitting around and talking doesn't.
Yes, so what you do is worship not simply with your head, just reading out of a prayer book or singing out of a hymnal, which is eye to word relationship, but you pray, you worship with your whole body, your whole self, heart, mind, soul, and body.
I think that it's well to know a little bit about how you folks happen to come to this. You're relatively recent in this emphasis?
Yes. My tradition is an academic one, from science to ancient languages to Old Testament scholarship. But my experience has been pretty much head-oriented till the past couple of years. I've moved into another mode of
What prompted
thinking and
that?
feeling. It was primarily a week-long workshop that in California with Matthew Fox
I see.
and his whole staff from the Institute of Culture and Creation Spirituality. It was a week-long experiential workshop.
I see. All right, and you've helped bring that
pulled
to our
something-
community.
Yes.
Sarah, I have to admit to having read an article that you wrote in the Christian Century, leading Protestant journal, and how that was on sacred dance, and how I think at the time you were working at Riverside Church in New York in this whole field. And I think it'd be well for our viewers to know a little bit about what triggered your involvement in this.
Well, it was kind of threefold, I guess, Rich. I was taught creative movement when I was studying theology, and a lot of our biblical work we were allowed to include movement or poetry. So I actually did some biblical studies on figures in the Bible and did dances based on them at the time. And then I learned more and became more interested in the history of dance and how it had been actually mostly congregational as opposed to performance. And I became very interested in what the effect is on a congregation when you get people moving or they see movement. And so I was a member of Riverside Church in New York City at that time and designed some special services. And then later, as I became more interested in and became a psychotherapist, I also realized that the ability to move is implicitly healing and does a lot for wholeness in people.
Okay.
So it had kind of three different areas over a 15-year span.
Well, we'll have a chance to come back and explore some of that, but we're going to take a pause right now and stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue.
Serving Austin means serving you. Each day, Austin Metropolitan Ministries is religion in action, providing affordable housing, caring for the elderly, marching against hunger, and much more. AMM promotes understanding, cooperation, and social involvement. So when we ask for your help, we're really asking to help you, Austin. To find out how you can help Austin Metropolitan Ministries help Austin through its member organizations, just call 472-7627.
We're back to Austin Faith Dialogue, and today we're looking at the liturgical movement that's called body prayer. Let's pause for a few moments and have another look at how this is expressed today in worship.
May my prayers rise as incense before thee, and the lifting of my hands as an evening sacrifice. May my prayers rise as incense before thee, and the lifting of my hands as an evening sacrifice. May my prayers rise as incense before thee, and the lifting of my hands as an evening sacrifice. God will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you shine like the sun, and hold you in the palms of God's hands. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me.
Now joining us again to probe this issue of body prayer are Sarah Bentley and Terry Dowdy. Terry, as we looked at this, I have a thought about the experience of being recruited to participate in this as this was being prepared, and how without really a rehearsal to speak of, you can get into it. It has a way of involving you.
Mm-hmm.
And but what makes people resist any kind of movement in church? There's in religious communities today a kind of inhibition about this, isn't there?
The practice, as I was taught as a child, the way you pray is that you fold your hands, you bow your head, you close your eyes, and you turn everything in.
Mm-hmm.
That's our tradition. To open everything up, and the posture like this is a posture of vulnerability. It's the posture of the cross. We don't like being vulnerable. And most of us are a little afraid of those vulnerable kinds of positions.
Mm-hmm.
And our society in general does not want us to display those sorts of feelings and emotions. We might go wild.
Mm-hmm. Might lose control.
And lose control,
Yeah.
yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Can you add to that, Sarah?
Well, I was just thinking that the religious experience, from whatever tradition you come, is so whole that it's ironic that we've ended up with very limited expressions of it. And I think some of us would argue perhaps one of the reasons people drift away from organized religious traditions is they have a certain static quality or woodenness in them.
Mm-hmm.
And people who experience body prayer or any form of art returning to the liturgy realize that it's enlivening. And they come alive and they say, well, this is a living tradition, which it is. It's a live tradition.
Well, the thing that I've wondered about is, you have down into recent centuries a continuation of that movement, like the Shakers were dancers.
Mm-hmm.
And the simple gifts, upon which we have a hymn in our tradition now, a new one called The Lord of the Dance.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I danced in the morning when the world was begun, and I danced in the stars and the sun. I mean, it is a recovery, and yet why it was lost. I mean, why it is that we've become inhibited. We don't have a time for you to do your psychotherapy on this, but just a thought about where we got off of that expressiveness.
Well, literally, historically, the use of drama and movement and other arts was put aside by at least by the Christian tradition somewhere in the Middle Ages, as it had become maybe too dominant or too secularized. And it also represents the expression of the people in liturgy. And so as worship became more focused on hierarchies or elites, especially leadership through clergy and bishops, there was a desire to formalize it, to have it be kind of stratified and not have these, as Terry said, sort of unpredictable elements. So rather than psychologize it, it actually even has a socio-political background in taking it out. And we come back to it in America partly through popular dance, out of African-American traditions, also out of the Western traditions of square dancing. I mean, communal dancing has existed in America, especially on the pioneer territories, forever. So we can recover it even from our own culture, but it takes a certain openness to understanding that this has always been part of a way to express community and faith.
We recently had the privilege of folks from the Broken Spoke on our show, and how they talked about what they called house dances, where they roll the carpet back and people, and it was a community building kind of thing. People would come from miles around. And I think that the whole sense of community building, it's not simply getting into your own self-awareness, although that's involved, but it also is a reaching out, as you were indicating before, Terry. And what in this season some people are celebrating the incarnation, what we saw in terms of this demonstration, how would you make a connection there?
Well, to my mind, body prayer is the incarnation. I mean, it is worship in the body and out of the body, the expression of Christ in us, and it's well, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and that's another thing that makes it a little bit frightening to some people, is because it is fun. And religion, prayer, worship, that's supposed to be serious business. Well, it is serious. It's serious play. It's the Lord of the dance. It's the God of creation that is embodied in all of creation and is expressed out of all of creation, even this part of creation.
It's also the divine child, literally. But most of us could move and feel less, or feel more spontaneous when we were children. And it's interesting that wide varieties of groups in the culture want to contact the inner child and, you know, heal the inner child. And yet we, again, have in the tradition both the theology, at least in the Christian tradition, of the divine child, and in body prayer we have the expression of being as a child, open, accepting, trusting, expressive.
And that might be part of, in terms of the Christ child, touching and tapping that inner need within us to be free, to be spontaneous, and to let the little children lead them, kind of thing.
When I do body prayer with a group, I am amazed that at the end of a body prayer, often people will, at the very end, will go, and then smile and feel good about their whole selves. Often in a church service, when we do body prayer mostly in circles, but you can do it in pews too. I've had the experience often of, after a service where we've done body prayer, it is the little old ladies who come up to me and say, "That was wonderful. I have not moved or even been asked to move my body in years." And it's that connection with that child that God feeds through things like body prayer.
Holistic faith.
Yes.
In the month we have left, I'd like to, just before looking at one other series of demonstrations, the repetition. There is a good bit of that. What does that mean and signify? Just to wrap that up for us, if you would, sir.
Well, I think usually if you get into a repeated motion, in a way like a repeated chant, the sound and the movement combined brings you into a certain centeredness. And there's a lot of traditions, the Jewish tradition, the Sufi traditions, that practice like repeated rocking or leaning. And it's literally, to use maybe a tricky phrase, a kind of an altered state. It is a religious ecstasy.
Well, you have helped us today center on what is a very important part of all faith traditions. And I'd like to thank you, Sarah Bentley, Terry, for being with us. And I'd like to thank you folks also. And before we part today, we'd like to have you celebrate the holiday season even further. A gift of We Three Kings, O Come All Ye Faithful, and Seed of God, performed in body prayer. Until next time on Austin Faith Dialogue, may the peace, joy of this season be with you all.
We